Hi, and welcome to the Girlfriend God. My name is Kelly, and I'll be your host.
Okay, it looks like I'm gonna have to freestyle this, you guys.
I'm about to do the same thing. My daughter's
Well, so for the first time in the history of this podcast, which admittedly isn't very long, I actually did some research and took notes so that I don't just let you guys talk and then I just interrupt you with questions.
I do love that. Excellent.
So, welcome, Kendall Elizabeth Parker and Dr. Carla Ionescu have been on the show multiple times before. The description of all their accolades and accomplishments and research focuses are in the podcast description. So today, this is episode 13, which means it's our season finale. I would like to announce to the listeners, both Kendall and Carla have graciously agreed to be occasional co-hosts in season 2. Some of the things that I already have lined up to talk about in season 2 are I'm going to be interviewing a religious studies PhD candidate here in Champaign about the divine feminine and prophetic rage.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
Yes, I'm going to be talking to somebody on Instagram. I'm going to be talking to her about women in various mythologies and how women, just what happened to women, right? Like they were, expected to be virginal and loyal to their husbands as they traveled the world and, conquered other lands and other women. And so we're going to talk about that. And what else do I have coming up? Oh, I'm doing a really exciting podcast interview with Minette Chilson, who's a Girl God Books author. And we're going to be talking about Lilith and Eve.
Ooh.
And as always, lots and lots and lots of goddess talk and spiritual talk, kind of branching out to goddess adjacent topics, right? Like Carla and I talked about the Hypogeum and the Chavot Cave, which wasn't necessarily about goddesses, but my belief, she's kind of in everything. So if you guys want to tell me about your experience with my first season, because let me make it all about me. Let me be clear.
It is your podcast, my friend.
It is my podcast.
So it's okay for you to be center stage and put yourself center stage sometimes. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So you came along with me on this ride. What have you thought
I
of
guess
your
I'll go. I guess
experiences
I'll
so
go
far?
first. Yeah. Okay. I'll go. So I enjoyed your podcast very much. So some of my favorite things about it, I love the fact that it's very informal and fun. I think most people listening enjoy that as well. So because I find as a learner myself, I like to learn from people that I feel are really relatable. That's probably everyone, but
right.
And so that's one of my favorite parts. My other favorite part, I think, is just the fact that you had the bravery and courage to just be like, I'm going to start a podcast. We're going to have fun and we're going to learn something. And you did.
It was definitely a call, right?
Yeah.
It was something I felt called to do. It was a divine inspiration. So.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you have your own twist to it and you bring like everyone, So yeah, I think that your first season was a success. And like everybody you're learning, like me too, right? Like you're learning stuff. Like for me, for example, as an academic, for a long time, I didn't see myself as a marketer or a customer service person, like sort of knowing, promotional person.
Right.
And then I had to learn all this stuff from scratch and I'm still learning.
Right.
So like just taking that step and doing it and then learning on the way, I think is the thing to be most proud of.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah.
Kendall.
Well, I have to say, I thought it was a brilliant idea that you're mixing the spiritual with the academic. Like, I've never seen that done in all the like mythology, goddess, history podcasts I've listened to. I've never seen that take on it, and I've really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that the first time that I interviewed you, Kendall, I think you didn't quite know what to make of of it or me. And I know you came prepared to talk about a bunch of things, and we had to do 2 episodes because I didn't let you talk about Venus at all, because I was so focused on Kabbalah. But yes, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people for this show in the first season. I don't even like to call it an interview. Like Carla, like you were saying, it's more of a conversation.
Yeah.
Right. And to, when I started the podcast, I wasn't sure what it was going to become. And then I developed that tagline about bringing you a mix of spiritual, emotional experience and academic research. And I think that's kind of the niche that I've now put myself in.
I think so.
Whether that's a blessing or a curse, it remains to be seen. But and I think that's what happens when a librarian starts a spiritual librarian starts a podcast. Right? Because I do consider myself a very, very spiritual person, and I consider both of you spiritual people and everybody that's been on the show. But I have my master's degree in library and information science, so I'm all about source material and citations and challenging information online.
Yes.
Right? We've all read things online in our particular fields of study that we know are inaccurate, and we have the source material to prove that.
Yeah.
Like I said in the very beginning, if you're stating something and you don't have a citation, you're just stating your opinion as fact.
Yeah.
And you guys don't do that. You bring me the facts, and
we try our best. I remember Kendall's episode. There were times where I was like, oh, for sure. Like when you would like tell her something, and I was like, for sure she's got those notes there, and she's like, okay, I guess we'll go this way now, because I know that's how I am. I'm like, especially when you don't know someone and you're first on an interview with them, you've got like all your stuff, right? And you're like, okay, let's talk about this random thing that you just want me to go on about. And so but it was really, so this is, I think, the part that I like, because it feels very like genuine in the sense that it's like clearly there was no script there.
Yeah,
right. It is. I mean, it is, and I hope that genuineness comes through to people that listen to the podcast, because if you know me at all, and I think I've talked to both of you enough that you know me a little, my desire to do this quote unquote work in the name of my devotion to the goddess is genuine. I mean, that is what I'm about. It's who I am. I'm not trying to make money. None of the social media channels or the podcast itself are monetized, because it was never about that. So I have a request.
Okay.
And if you're not okay with it, that's totally fine. But I would like to start this episode. I guess I should tell the listeners what this episode is actually about. So our season finale is about the Virgin Mary, but it's about so much more than that. I think what I put in the episode description was that we are going to discuss the iconography soup that went into the creation of the figure of the Virgin Mary, who's one of the most widely known symbols of feminine divinity in the world. But to start this episode, if you guys are okay with it, I would like to read a prayer.
Okay.
All right.
So this prayer is from, that book that I'm obsessed with, that I talk about all the time. The Gospel of our Mother God. And I just want to point out visually to you guys, the audience is going to have to imagine. In the front matter, it has a frontispiece. That's what it's called when there's a page in the front of a book that has like an image or an engraving or whatever. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Did you know that?
Mhm.
I
That
did.
it's called a frontispiece.
Yes.
Okay. So the frontispiece in the Gospel of our Mother God, the scripture of the world's first faith, is a picture that looks remarkably like the Virgin Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what's underneath it from their scripture of the mythos of God the daughter, it says, "Rejoice, poor wanderer of the earth and exiles from the house of your mother, for to you shall come a guide and a deliverer." So the prayer, don't worry, it's short. Deionists have a trilogy mythology like the Christians do, right? Like they have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And Deionists believe in mother, daughter, and the dark goddess. So this prayer is called Daughter of Light. Daughter of light that reigns as Queen of Heaven, all praise and honor we joyfully give to you. Give us to know that you are by us in every act we make. Teach us obedience and humility and joy of heart that comes of self-forgetting. Help us to be clear mirrors of your love, reflecting all the beauty of the world, for the beauty is the echo of eternity. Fix our hearts on the eternal, and let us not be turned from you by transient things. And rescue us from the hands of darkness, that we may serve you with all our being here and in your bright eternity. Isn't that a beautiful prayer?
Yeah, that was nice.
It's not
So,
terrible.
it's not terrible.
I'm not a fan of the obedience aspect.
Well,
But
so for me, I think of it as obedience to spiritual principles. Because the spiritual principles that I have, which everybody has, right? Mostly it's, be nice, be of service to others and don't be a dick, right?
Yep. Yep.
So being obedient to that is being obedient to the goddess, because my personal set of spiritual principles are a gift of her grace in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I made the term obedience a little more palatable to me.
Yeah. I'm starting to think, because you know how we talked about this monotheistic goddess movement that you've been researching, and I've thought about that. And so I think the one place where I think you and I separate a bit, Kelly, is like, I like bask in the liberation of non-monotheistic goddess, like no rules, no hierarchy. I actually just saw an article today that reminded me of our conversation about hierarchies in like which groups and things like that. I just saw an article too that says like, when is hierarchy acceptable and when is it not? And my first reaction to that was like, never. There should never be any hierarchy, which is weird because I'm a professor and I have students, so there's hierarchy in my everyday life. But yeah, so that I think that's my sort of reaction also to the prayer. It feels, yeah, to me, maybe, I don't know, because I grew up so sheltered in the monotheistic tradition, and now I'm at a point where I'm like, the goddess for me doesn't make me answer to anything or anyone. Of course, within moral values. I mean, I'm not going to go hurt people.
Right. Well,
or the environment or trees or,
Right. And you know that my way around that is, my whole diamond god theory that I've worked with, prayed to, hung out with probably hundreds of goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, they are all reflections of the creatrix. So
yeah.
So Kendal, anything to add to that before we move on to the badass Mother Mary?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So, okay. Well, the Virgin Mary. Let's get to it, shall we? So I'm going to start with my notes, and then you guys can jump in, and I will likely come up with questions. And you are the academics in the house, so you can tell me if any of this is incorrect.
Okay.
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 So, Kendall, I didn't share this with you, but I will. I can email you a link. Yesterday, I found and I sent to Carla this article on a website called Intriguing History. And it was a
Hmm.
blog post from 2016 about the cult of the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
And so this is how the article opened. The author said, and I couldn't find the author's name, so I just cited the website.
Mhm.
But he said, whilst relatively few women appear in the Bible, many of them are called Mary. There's Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, Mary of Bethany, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When we consider the medieval cult of the Virgin Mary, therefore, it might be wise to remember the other Marys, in particular, Mary Magdalene, and consider how they are wrapped up within the adoration of the cult. So
Hmm.
that's your launching point. What did you come prepared to talk about in relation to what I just read?
Go ahead, Kendall.
I've heard, like I have no idea whether this is accurate or not, and I couldn't tell you where I've read it, but I've read somewhere that Mary, Mother of Christ, and Mary Magdalene were the same person.
Yes.
Sorry, Mary.
Carla?
Sorry, say that again, Kendall. Mary, the mother of God, and Mary of Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene and Mary, the Mother of God. I've read somewhere that they were the same person.
Oh, I would say no. Kendall. I would say whoever wrote that was very wrong. Okay. So, sorry, the thoughts are all aligning now in my head. One of the issues is, of course, with the name Mary, because it was so popular during this time. So Mary or Miriam in Hebrew is the same name, right? And so there were like, I guess it's as popular back then as it was now, interestingly. And so Mary Magdala or Mary Magdalene was really a widow. And she's one of the financial supporters of the movement of Jesus. So she was a wealthy, educated woman, and some gospels tell us that she was a rabbi in her own right. So that's a separate Mary. Somehow she got convoluted or combined with the prostitute that Jesus allows to wash his feet or take care of him. The church, whether purposely or just sort of on trend, began sort of associating Mary Magdalene with this prostitute. And it depends who you talk to. Some feminist scholars in Marianism will say that was purposely done to demote Mary Magdala from the role that she played that was more like a partner to Jesus, or at the least a disciple of his. Some people will say that there are so many Marys in the Gospels that they all kind of got sort of mashed together. But she is certainly 100% not a prostitute, not the prostitute in the story. And according to the Gospel of Peter that we found a while back now, she is definitely the partner of Jesus, where the culture of Jesus being married to Mary Magdala has come out, the Da Vinci Code and all that kind of stuff. So and there is a tradition that after Jesus died, she may have gone on preaching in his name or for him as a rabbi. Of course, then she went into hiding and she disappeared. So while the Virgin Mary is another separate woman being, like literally a human being who birthed him. Now, the virgin birth, we can talk about that, sort of the mythology around that. But certainly Jesus had a mother And that mother was important to him. And that mother may have also come with him on his talks and walking around. And my favorite thing is that the only person that tells Jesus what to do in the New Testament is his mother. That one time when she goes, yo, like, there's not enough wine at this wedding, do something about it. And Jesus kind of answers, right? He goes, oh, well, you don't know. My time has not come yet. But then he does what his mother asks him. So for me, that was actually a very powerful moment of sort of almost, I would say, the tiniest reflection of Christianity allowing a type of, what's the word? I want to say consort relationship, but I don't want people to come at me for like the sexualization of consort. But it's almost
you mean my 6 listeners?
Yeah. No, I mean, I just don't want to. I don't have maybe a partnership, because Jesus doesn't really listen to anyone else and doesn't ever do anything anyone else asks him. But his mother asks him this one thing, and he does it. So that's really important. I don't know. It stands out in the books as the only time that happened. So that's definitely his mother. So I don't know who wrote that they may have been the same person. That's a bit creepy, but also. But there were a lot of Marys. There's another Mary that's at the cross too. Mary, the mother of the two disciples whose names are escaping me.
The mother of James and Joseph.
So, according to history, the Virgin Mary, after having Jesus, also had James and John and Simon, James, John, Simon, I think, and 2 daughters. But Catholics especially don't like that idea, and they have the idea that Mary is eternal virgin, which would have been unrealistic for a young Jewish woman.
And that's what I was going to say about, I think, because what Kendal was talking about, I feel like, because further in that article about the cult of the Virgin Mary, the author talks about Pope Gregory, which is essentially the person who kind of created the Mother Mary mythology, at least according to this guy. And that was in 540 to 604 AD. And he says that the image of women, and here we mean Mary, became altered and misinterpreted. Mary became a figure unto which all manner of virtues and power were hung. So I read that as this irony of the iconography is that all the goddesses that went into the creation of the Mary mythology were certainly not virginal, chaste,
right?
Unclean or unbeholden to any man or consort. And so my understanding is Pope Gregory did not want that to be the picture of feminine divinity. Thus the virgin birth, right? She's never even had sex or been quote unquote unclean in that way. So I think Mary Magdalene as a prostitute, which is complete mythology as well, right? There's no evidence. There's no archaeological or anthropological evidence of that. That is a story made up by the church hundreds of years after the death of Jesus, or the alleged death of Jesus. So I think that juxtaposition between the prostitute and the clean and virginal mother, that's very intentional, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you were talking about, Kendal?
Yeah, because obviously a lot of my research into the Virgin Mary's come from how she's connected to like Venus and Cybele and Sekhmet, and how these goddesses obviously are a lot different to how Mary is portrayed, but obviously they're all integrated into Mary, or the mythology of her, at least.
So most of my notes are about this kind of stolen symbolism. Like when I identified as pagan, which I guess I still do in the broad sense of the term, right? Which is anything other than the three major Judeo Christian traditions in the world. So in that sense, I'm pagan. But beyond that, that's where the similarity ends, right? Because we all know I'm not a polytheist. But paganism was my kind of route that I went through to get to where I am now, because I worked with so many other goddesses. So I'm going to tell you about the stolen symbolism that I see, and you guys can chime in with whatever you know about whatever you know.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So the first kind of stolen symbolism that I see is Mary as a mother, right? Because in ancient Christian, or maybe not ancient Christian, I don't know. Am I not using the term ancient correctly, you guys?
No, I don't think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Maybe early Christian.
Yeah.
Early Christian, right. In early Christian art and sculpture, Mary is most commonly seen either seated or standing in the sky and the clouds, and dressed in a white robe and a blue veil, and all of that symbolism was taken from other goddesses and other traditions, right?
Yeah.
So even just the color blue, right? She's always in blue. And in elemental magic, blue is the color for water, right? And the alchemical symbol for water is blue. Mother, which we both know, or all of us know, the mother symbology goes back, I don't know, 30,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Since the
accurate?
beginning, I would say. Yeah, for sure.
And especially the thing with water, because there are a lot of water goddesses or associated with water, like Venus, right, Kendall?
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me about where you see that, where do you see that mother? How did that get kind of put into this Mother Mary mix?
Well, when I was looking at that, what I found striking was there are statues and stelae of the Egyptian goddess Isis. And also, I believe there's one of Sekhmet, in what we would now know as like the traditional pose of Mary sat with Jesus on her knee.
Right.
But this is like Isis with a like Pharaoh, I believe, on her knee. And the same with Sekhmet. So like that iconography came before with different goddesses.
Right. Carla?
Yeah. I agree 100%, Kendall. I would say that the mother-son figure, the consort figure, is, as far as material culture, our first representation, and I may be wrong, so if there's anyone out there that finds another one, is Isis and Horus. The interesting aspect of that, though, is that Isis and Horus become lovers. They have their own children. So for a long time, there was always I may have lied a little bit, because Gaia and Uranus, although Isis and Horus come before Gaia and Uranus. Anyways, sorry, again, chronology in my head. But the tradition that a mother goddess births a consort, then that consort becomes her lover, and they birth whatever other divinities, is a very old tradition.
Yes.
But you're right, the direct representation of Horus sitting on Isis' lap or breastfeeding, and then Mary and Jesus almost similar, although Jesus, I don't think there is one of Jesus breastfeeding, but maybe in sort of maybe the 1200s or the medieval periods, there may be some, but yeah, that image is replicated exactly almost. With, again, like you say, Kelly, different clothing, different coloring. So I guess, yeah, in a way they sort of are very conservative in the depiction of Mary with Jesus on her lap, or they both hold the hearts. There's that image. I remember there's that image, right, where they both sitting facing forward and they have the flaming hearts, or the
Right.
So I think there's added imagery in those Christian depictions versus Isis and Horus, and they take away the snake on Isis and Horus's foreheads, which I love. Again, that sort of symbol of wisdom. So yeah, I think that that's part of it. And I like the idea of the blue. The blue, of course, is also purity, celestialness,
calmness, serenity.
Yeah. And of course, covering of the head and body. Right. So again, that's
again
sort of
the opposite of Mary Magdalene, the hussy.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I mean that story of the virgin and whore, the virgin and whore duality in feminism and in history is sort of a basic duality that you learn in feminist theory. And we see that today. I teach that sometimes to my students, where I'm like, think about celebrities. How many of them do we consider pure, virginal, cute, adorable? And how many of them do we consider sluts and whores? We still have this division between women. Or when men say, oh, this is a woman I take home to my mother, this is a woman I don't take home to my mother,
Right.
And we can go on about that for a whole other episode. But, that virgin and whore, it comes a bit from the Greeks as well. It's an old duality, but Christianity really embodies that and they've really placed the Virgin Mary and so-called Mary Magdalene, the prostitute, and those two things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's only two places for women, okay? You're either a mother or you're a whore.
Right.
Right.
And that has followed us all the way to today.
Yeah.
That dichotomy. Mm-hmm. So I guess the other thing I want to say about the mother, right? When we talk about the mother, that is a very old idea that predates Christianity as well. And so when we talk about or read things about, like, Carla, the first book in your book club, The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth, right? So in a lot of what I have read is that in a lot of other cultures, part of the creation story or the creation mythology about the earth as mother, like there's the cosmic egg. I don't know if you've ever heard about the cosmic egg, right? But that's the creation story of how the goddess gave birth to the world and the sun and the moon and stars and all of that, which sounds very monotheistic to me.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
And the whole thing with Gaia, right? And we see that resurgence of that today, probably largely due to kind of a new age, modern witchcraft movement, right? That started with Wicca, right? Because Wicca introduced these ideas of the worship of the moon, right? And the moon as a feminine symbol. So I think the trajectory of Gaia has remained fairly constant. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would say that Gaia, in Greek mythology, Gaia is really the equivalent of Yahweh, God, or Allah for monotheism, because in the beginning there was nothing and then there was Gaia.
Right.
Right? And right?
Yeah.
So I would say that that's the epitome of mother goddesses, although it is very Greek. Okay, we can say she predates the Greek Mycenaeans, Minoans, etc., but she's not the earliest form. I think before that, the mother was always the earth. If we're going back to like Neolithic tribal culture,
right.
I think that the mother was down, like inward on the planet rather than celestial. There's something about patriarchy that moved from earth worship to sky worship. Ironically, even then, Gaia is still the feminine aspect of creation, the creator. So it was
right.
And
that followed through, I think, into Christian texts, including the Old Testament, where we see evidence of this mother, right, outside of the Virgin Mary. Like when I did the episode about and Sophia and Asherah and the Shekinah,
Yeah.
I read a lot about, goddess in the Bible, and it's all over the place. And when they talk about Mary as the Queen of Heaven, Queen of Heaven, that's a powerful role to be the Queen of Heaven, right? I'm looking at this article that I have about the Queen, or the Mother Goddess in
divine,
Scripture.
it's a divine role, which again, I think that especially Catholics take a lot of heat for, because a Queen of Heaven is not like just a mother of Jesus. She certainly has authority and autonomy in that terminology, right?
Right.
So a lot of people will say, well, that's what proves that Catholics worship Mary more than Jesus. And I mean, Catholics would deny it. I mean, I grew up Catholic and they go, oh no, we venerate her. But the line between, like we talked about, veneration and worship is so thin. I mean,
right.
And as Queen of Heaven, that is a goddess position.
Right.
Right. I mean, Isis was Queen of Heaven.
Yes.
Right. Artemis of Ephesus is sometimes referred to as Queen of Heaven. The Greek Artemis is referred as Savior. Right. So there's a sort of salvation. So like goddesses have had these titles.
Right. Somewhere in the Girlfriend God podcast social media feed, there's a slideshow of goddesses throughout time and throughout different cultures that were referred to as the Queen of Heaven. So I wanted to ask you both to kind of, because we all had an experience of sorts with the Virgin Mary. Now, Carla, you and I come from Catholic upbringing, so that was kind of our first introduction to Mary. But Kendal, you also told me the story about the Virgin Mary in the gift shop.
Yeah, I've got her right here.
Oh, you brought her! Yay!
Oh, Kendal.
Yes. Obviously, I don't know if Carla heard the story about that. But yeah, I was in an antique shop and she was just there on the side, and I felt like I cannot leave this shop and not take her with me. She's got to come.
Incredible. Yes, I heard the story, but incredible. Yes.
So I think we all, and so Kendal, I don't know much about religion in your upbringing. Like, did you always have a sense of this Mother Mary mythology and iconography? Did you go to a church, or?
I was aware of it. When I was in primary school, I was in a primary school where they would take us to church and we would pray and we would do choir and things like that, though it wasn't strictly a religious school. And my parents are both atheist. But my maternal grandma, who I was very close with, was a very strict Catholic. She was school with nuns and serious Catholic. And so I heard stories from her growing up. It was never something I believed in myself, but I found that it interested me enough for me to devote my life to studying ancient religions. So.
Right. And did you find that you were attracted to the feminine aspect?
Yes.
The feminine aspect that was available to you, I guess, in Christianity.
Yes. Yeah. And it kind of went from there, discovering other goddesses, and then the links back to her.
So did any of us hear about Mary Magdalene when we were young, and instead of turning away from that, we were like, I want to know more about her?
Yes.
Because I know I did. I wanted to know more.
I did not. That is so interesting that you asked that, Kelly, because now I think of it, I was so devoted to the Virgin Mary when I was a kid for so long. I connected to her like mothering aspect.
Right.
And your friend did my birth chart, which was really incredible. And there's a lot in there that explained why that was the case. But I've always been very mothery, nurturing, mothery. So I connected that. But now that you say that, I think to myself, why did I not connect to Mary Magdalene at all? So now I'll have to think about that. Like, I knew about her. Of course, we all know about her growing up in the Christian faith, even a little bit. No, I didn't. I didn't even think about her.
Oh, I did. I was
I'd say about me.
Well, and so in doing my research this morning, and I have gone down this Mary Magdalene path before, and read about in the Gnostic Gospels, right? All the Gospels that were left out of the Bible. There's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Yep.
And there again, we're not really sure which Mary is the Gospel of Mary. I think it's Mary Magdalene simply because I do think of Mary Magdalene as the partner of Jesus.
I think, me too.
That's how my grandma always described her.
Yes. And so the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is very much, I mean, are either of you familiar with it? Have you read parts of it?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't.
Okay. So it is believed that the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is really just like a recording of things that Jesus actually said.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it was left out of the Bible, because it's a very different message.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the examples, and I don't know if this is from the Gospel of Mary or not, but one of the examples I always remember is that we always hear Christians and Catholics in particular talk about that Jesus is the light and the way. But in my understanding, and the piece that they miss or suppress, is that when Jesus said, I am the light, his next sentence was, and so are all of you.
That's right. That's from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear somebody say that, Jesus is my savior, Jesus is the light, I think, and so are you. And so are you. So the suppression of that and of the Gospel of Mary and demonizing Mary Magdalene really turned us away from that belief in the great mother, right? I mean, now I'm just kind of talking off the cuff. But since I have spent the whole season interrupting you guys to ask questions, feel free to interrupt me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So because I'm a very visual person, so I'm into a lot of, symbolism and iconography. And so I created this list of things that I know are associated with the Mother Mary that come from somewhere else, like the mother and child thing that you guys already talked about.
Yeah.
I read about, so it's not a Mary reference, but it is a Bible reference to talk about the shepherd, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I found that in 5th millennium BCE, the Rhaetians, I think that's how you say that, but I often mispronounce things. The Rhaetians were an ancient people in the Alps.
Okay.
Okay. And they had a mountain goddess of the Alps known as Raisha, who was a lady shepherdess, is how they referred to her.
Okay.
So the iconography in Christianity of the shepherd, and I don't know if they ever referred to Mary or thought of the Virgin Mary as a shepherdess, but I see that thread. I mean, the Christians have stolen a lot of things from ancient cultures, right? I used to talk about all the things they stole from paganism, but they also stole a lot of things that go way, 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 way back. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
So that was the thing about the Lady Shepherdess. Mary is often in art, both ancient art and modern Christian art, Mary is often depicted with doves.
Yes.
And you know who else is associated with doves?
Venus.
Venus and Inanna. And Inanna.
Yes, and Inanna.
Art representing those goddesses are, they're often seen with doves kind of fluttering around them or sitting on their hands or, so the whole dove thing was there long before the creation of the Virgin Mary myth. As peacocks in early Christian symbolism, they were associated with immortality and the tree of life. And the peacock is still used in the Easter season, especially in the East. I was going to say that. You already knew that. Yes, in Greek mythology, peacock is the representation of Hera. Correct, Dr. Ionescu?
Correct. She says with a snark.
Okay.
And then, as you said, in Greek mythology, the peacock is the representation of Hera.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. I wonder if there, I mean, I've not looked for it, but I wonder if there's any connections between Hera and Mary.
Well, I think that's it, right? Because I think the peacock thing, that is that connection.
Yeah. I have been using this book. I actually got it for my final assessment for uni, but it's come in so useful when I've been researching for talking to you. The Mother of the Gods, from Cybele to the Virgin Mary.
Ooh.
And it tells you basically in it like where Cybele came from and how she's evolved over the years, and obviously then how she ends up then being incorporated into the Virgin Mary.
Right.
It's very good.
So, pelicans as symbolism. Pelicans will take their beak and puncture their own chest to feed their young if there's no food. So, as I said, the pelicans were used to represent Christ's willingness to suffer for his children. But in ancient Egypt, Henet means pelican. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Henet, the goddess Henet, Henet.
Yeah, that sounds right.
In ancient Egyptian. So I was going to tell you what the pyramid texts were. Pyramid texts, the oldest ancient Egyptian funerary texts that date to the late Old Kingdom. Okay? So in the pyramid texts, this Henet, this pelican goddess, is known as, are you ready for it? Wait for it. Henet is known as the mother of the king. So
fitting.
And thus ends my research. So now you guys can talk about whatever it was you brought to this this discussion episode of the grand season finale of The Girlfriend God. I love my closing. I love
Love
my
it.
closing on podcast.
Hmm.
It's actually me whispering to you, the girlfriend god. I'll get more into that in season two. Why the title, the girlfriend god? Because there's definitely a story there.
All right. Kendall, you go ahead. Because I might be here for 5 hours. So yeah.
Yeah, so I was just telling Kelly, I've been reading this book, The Mother of the Gods from Cabele to the Virgin Mary, um, for my final assessment at uni. And it tells you like all the history and the origin of the goddess Cabele, and how she evolved through the centuries into the Virgin Mary. And with Kibele, it's more than just like iconography and things like that. Like Saint Augustine incorporated the like rituals and prayers and things to Kibele into the Gnostic cult of the Virgin Mary. Obviously changing the name and to suit the new religion, but he basically took everything that was Kibele and evolved it into what we now know as the Virgin Mary. So I found that like lots of goddesses are incorporated, like Venus and Sekhmet and Isis, and maybe a little bit of Hera. But out of all of those, I found that Cabele is the goddess that's been mostly recreated as a like it's more than just iconography and elements. But she's also one of the oldest known goddesses generally. So, like, I've always taken that as obviously this mother goddess is like predated anything else. Like, she was there before anything else. Mm-hmm. And she might have evolved and had different names, but before the patriarchy became a thing, it was her. Mm-hmm. 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 So yeah, that's basically where my research has been going. Mm-hmm. I feel particularly connected to Cabele because of how far back she goes, but obviously also how far forward she goes into today's religions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that you said that like that. Yes. Yeah, I think I think she's probably the best fit for the transformation of Mary out of all of them. I mean, like you say, it does embody. Mary embodies many of the others. And so for me, I found a bunch of clues of how Artemis is embodied in Mary. But Artemis is also said to be a sort of transformation from Cabela as well, and especially in Ephesus with what people used to believe were all the breasts on her jacket, let's say, on her statue.
Oh yeah.
Right, and so Cybele is famously known for the multi-breasted goddess, and there's even actually I've seen I did an article for a journal, blah blah blah, a while back, and it was about the obsession of like breastfeeding, the fetishization of breastfeeding, and for that article I had to do, of course, Artemis of Ephesus, because what happens is Artemis of Ephesus doesn't actually have nipples on her statue, on her ancient statue breasts, but Europeans and like Christians, let's say through the medieval period and forward, they start adding nipples so they can only understand her jacket, I'm calling it, her vest, as breasts, but they're actually, in my opinion, beehives, right? But they connect her to Cybele, right? And so they go, oh yeah, because Cybele had all these breasts and is often depicted in the ancient world with breasts, that must mean that Artemis of Ephesus also had breasts. And then you have this sort of recycling or upcycling of this idea. And there was even recently in New York, maybe not that recently, but maybe 10 years ago, a statue of Kybele. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I think it's in front of the New York, or was in front of the New York Museum, but I can send you a picture of it. And it's basically like an abstract statue of clearly a woman, though, with like 12 breasts, I think.
Okay.
But it was dedicated to Kybele. But I think from that comes this idea of breastfeeding as nurturing, right? And the breast of the mother, but also the breast of the earth, blah, 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 all those sort of combinations of that terminology. And so then that, of course, gets associated with Mary as the nurturer of the world and the mother of the world and all that stuff associated with it. Yeah. 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 For me, for my research, because I focus on Artemis, obviously, and especially Artemis in Ephesus, and because in Ephesus in 431 is where the Ephesians forced the Christian church to name Mary Theotokos, which is Mother of God. So my argument is that the Ephesians were so connected to Artemis, to a divine feminine, that when Christianity arrived, the only divine feminine available, of course, is Mary, the Virgin Mary, the Mother Mary, because they wouldn't have associated, even if they believed that Mary Magdalene back then was a partner of Jesus, that is still not so like sacred enough. That's more of a partner-wife relationship. So I think the mother relationship is really the relationship that all humans crave, and we've had our whole existence. And so I think that association with, they had been devoted to Artemis for, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and suddenly Christianity shows up, and the only real character that fits is Mary, the Virgin Mary. And so they really they reshaped Christianity in a way, because since that moment that Mary becomes Mother of God, she becomes even more sacred. Some would argue equal to Jesus. Like Pope John Paul II tried to make her co-redemptress. He put forward a bill, a legislation, a request that tried to make her co-redemptrix, which would be equal to Jesus. And of course, the backlash was, what do you mean? That makes her equal to Jesus. And so it didn't get approved. But he was so devoted to Mary as this mother goddess or mother of God that he saw her on an equal playing field. And I think many people do. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is that we, as Christianity funneled our options for goddesses, we naturally are called to the divine feminine, but the only one that comes immediately to us as Christians is Mary, the Virgin Mary. And so in a way, I guess that's sort of the little piece of, our natural history that remains for us, because thank God we didn't lose her. There are, I don't think we could have, to be honest. I don't think they could have beaten the divine feminine out of us.
No.
But they tried.
But boy, did they try. That's what I was just going to say. So back to that, the cult of the Virgin Mary piece. That's why I said, we've got to blame Pope Gregory the First, because it talks about how he was really the disciplined and reforming pope who created this kind of mythological imagery around both Mary as the mother of Jesus and Mary Magdalene as the whore. I mean, he's according to this article, Pope Gregory the First is the one who is responsible for that image of Mary Magdalene as the whore. Because the article says, he drew her as the repentant prostitute, warding off a spiritual plague to fight off an actual plague, the backdrop to that period in European history. At the same time, Gregory elevated the Virgin Mary to a new high status of venerated virginity. So the two Marys together forged a vision of womanhood, the sexuality of Mary Magdalene, her corruption and shame, followed by her repentance and forgiveness, juxtaposed with the absolute purity of the Virgin Mary. And then this author says, by doing this, Pope Gregory took power away from women
Absolutely.
in the church.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because the women in the Catholic Church and Christian churches had no power, still have no power.
It's kind of like a Lilith and Eve situation.
Yes. If you ask 9 out of 10 Christians if they know who Lilith is, they don't. That's a statistic I just made up, which could be completely inaccurate.
I think a lot of people don't know who Lilith is, but they're starting to know. I mean, my first episode on my podcast was Lilith, and I think that made a statement that was the statement I want to make. Like, let's start off with this. But I do find that people come to that episode and are like, I really love this. I had heard of Lilith, but didn't really know so much. So I think there may be some sort of message in the air, but I don't know if you're speaking about sort of American Christians, Kelly.
Yes, which I often am, because that's where I am.
Unfortunately, I think that they would not know unless it's maybe the demonized version on TV. I don't think that they have access to this story of her in the Midrash.
Right. Because here, so in the US, it's like our commercialism directs our spirituality, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like you say, Christians in the United States who watched True Blood, that was probably their introduction to Lilith.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Exactly. Or some other, WB TV show.
Right.
Supernatural or whatever.
Right. The sudden rise in popularity of Hecate, because she was the focal point on the last 2 seasons of Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Oh my God, don't get me started about that show.
Okay, let's stick to Mary.
Yes. Yeah, but I agree. Like, I think that's where they would. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's room, I think, for American Christianity to do some research, but obviously it's very not encouraged nor available. And so, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Except all the people that are degree-seeking students in religious studies.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wait till you guys hear Manette Chilson talk about Lilith next season. Manette Chilson is a force to be reckoned with.
I'm excited.
Yeah, she's great. She's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at, so this article says, Saint Luke, the gospel writer, is thought in Byzantine to be an artist and painted a picture of the Virgin Mary. It is believed, and I have to say this out loud, right? This article has a severe lack of citations. So, it is believed that he painted a half-length portrait from the life of the Virgin holding Jesus in her arms on the mountain of Jerusalem. The portrait is then thought to have been given to Theophilus, to whom Luke had dedicated the Acts of the Apostles.
Okay.
It is thought that, what then became of this image? It is thought that Eudokia, the wife of the Emperor Theodosius, acquired the picture when she made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land.
Sweet Jesus.
Thoughts? Tell us how you really feel, Carla.
Well, I'm not a fan of Luke. Let me just tell you that. But he wasn't intelligent. I mean, he was a doctor, or whatever a doctor meant at that time. So he was an intelligent person and a good writer. So he created quite a bit of stories. Did he paint a picture of Mary? I don't know. If he did, he never mentioned it anywhere. He never talked about his skills as an artist. And Luke doesn't really like women very much. So I don't know. I'm not sure. That's my reaction, is like,
Well, and that's the other thing that eludes American Christians, is that the Bible, like, it escapes them how much of an influence men had on them. Like, they take the Bible to literally be the Word of God. There are no other gospels except those in the Bible. And you know what I mean? Like, how Christians manage to not see the stories of the Bible as mythology is beyond me.
Like, I think that you can take the stories, the four gospels, and you can say, okay, here's a guy that maybe knew a guy that knew a guy that walked with Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? Because we have the dates for them. So we know when they were written. We know who wrote first. We know that Luke had like Mark or Matthew in front of him. We know there's a missing source called Q. We know, and even Google knows. I mean, this is just pure basic search. So I can understand if you say, okay, the Gospels are maybe a collection of stories that were in the community in which each Gospel writer wrote. Okay. But you have to accept that Luke never met Jesus. No, actually, none of them. John, certainly not. What's his name? Mark and Matthew certainly did not. So none of them walked with him. So you have to accept at least that much, right? Like, so who told them the stories?
Yeah.
There's only two of them only Luke, I think, and Matthew have the stories of a virgin birth. The other two have no idea. So, and lots of things, like you can literally Google. When I teach Christianity, we Google like charts that compare the gospels. So they'll show you like what each, you've seen those charts. So anyone could Google that and see what's missing in each gospel and see what's expanded in each gospel. But these were their stories that, let's say, at best, they collected, heard.
Right.
But they're second, third-hand stories.
Right.
You can't deny that. I mean, if you think that God came down to Luke and said this to him, even Luke doesn't say that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
Even the Gospel writers themselves don't say, I had a revelation from God about Jesus's life.
Right.
So I don't know. Sometimes I get, and especially because we're speaking about Mary, both Matthew and Luke trace Jesus's lineage to David through Joseph.
Right.
Hello.
Right.
I mean, I think Matthew says it outright, or is it Matthew or Mark? I might be getting those two. I always get those two confused. But anyways, Luke says, because he has them in front of him, he goes, oh yeah, and Jesus is connected to David supposedly through Joseph. But he still says it. But I when I read that when I was a kid, I was like, well, why do we need, if Jesus is the Son of God, why do we even need this genealogy at all?
Right.
Like, why are we doing DNA, Maury sort of, you are the father kind of thing? Anyway. So I think a lot of people don't actually read their Bibles.
Well, and the other thing I see American Christians overlook all the time is that to them, like, the King James version of the Bible is like the most accurate Bible. But I mean, the oldest complete copy still in existence that I know of is the Leningrad Codex. Mm-hmm. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kendal, the Leningrad Codex has been dated to 1000 CE.
Okay.
And the Samaritan Pentateuch,
yeah,
is a version of the Torah maintained by the Samaritan community since antiquity. rediscovered by European scholars in the 17th century, and its oldest existing copies date to 1100 CE. So I just feel like more religious people and spiritual people, I wish they cared about their history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially like, kind of new age spiritualism. I don't know anybody that I would consider to be new agey who has ever questioned where the things that they believe come from. You know what I mean?
Yes. And that's sort of my pet peeve with some of the new age stuff. Like, I'm always torn because I want to encourage people to practice what they feel.
Right.
But as a historian, there's no way I can ever not suggest that you look up the history of whatever you're studying. And as you know, Kel, we had this conversation about sort of now this has become my calling, So what I'm doing is I'm open to teaching any spiritualist that wants to know about goddesses in my field. I mean, I don't study as much, for example, Eastern goddesses or other things, but like, if you would like to learn the history of it, or the primary source and maybe even the secondary source of this divinity or these divinities before you set off on this journey, I would love to give you some sources and maybe some mentorship in that way. So I think that's important. I have a cousin who I love very much, but she once took me to meet this group of friends of hers that were spiritualists, and they had the most random set of, I don't know, stories. Like, they were mixing Egyptian stories with indigenous stories, with sort of like the Palladians, Anunnaki stories. And I mean, I love being around different groups of people and like seeing sort of what they're doing with the goddess. But for a long time, I was confused. Like, they would say things to me and I'd be like, okay, but this timeline doesn't fit this timeline, and like this god belongs in this culture and they were like, well, we've been called to like blend them together and reset them. And then that's when my sort of academic skeptic goes in, like, so like who called you?
Like, whoever invented the term eclectic witchcraft,
right,
did us a real disservice. They really did.
Yeah.
That's why so in the things that I am interested in and read about, the purest spiritual traditions are closed traditions. Right? So much of witchcraft is drawn from these open traditions and Wicca. And so it's the same thing in the witchcraft community. Like, hello, the craft that we talk about and the beliefs that we have existed before the dawn of Wicca. Right?
Exactly.
It's much older than that. Yeah. Now I feel like we're just having a bitch session about academics versus spiritual people who don't know their own history.
Pause for the bitch section. Yes.
Finale, why not?
Why not? But I think they're all interrelated, right? I think they're interrelated because it's this idea of transforming a spirituality, and that's what Christianity did, certainly. So yeah, people are practicing that even today. And I'm not saying they don't have the ability to like do what you want, but I guess when it comes to sharing that or getting people to follow or asking me, for example, to be like, oh, believe this, that's when I'm like, well, let's talk about this for a minute,
Right.
Yeah, and I think all three of us like history. Like, I think that's our thing, right? Like, we like to trace back to the rawest, purest source.
Right. Yeah. Which was interestingly like never my thing in school when I was young. I hated history because, well, here, you don't learn a whole lot about, maybe you do now, I don't know. But when I was young, like adolescent, teenager, in schools here, history is pretty much only about American history. Like, we are not taught ancient history and mythology and things like that. Is that true for you guys, Carla, is that true in Canada? Is that true in the UK, Kendall?
No, that's not true in the UK. I remember being in school and learning about the Egyptians. And my daughter is in year 3. I'm not sure what the American equivalent of that would be. She's 7. And they're learning about prehistoric societies at the minute. I don't remember doing that at school, but so that's new. But I've always enjoyed history at school, and it has gone quite far. We have done a lot of focus. They do put a lot of focus on British history because obviously we're British, but they do try to incorporate other things. Like we have done the ancient Egyptians, like we have done some Greeks and Romans, classical history. And apparently now they're teaching prehistory. Yeah, but I can understand why it would be more limited in America because
we're a much younger country.
Yeah, from an English point of view, like America was only founded by Americans, like in what we would call modern history. Like
Yes,
you've got right. After the modern history.
Right. But I mean, the land was here before.
Yeah. But they don't teach you about that.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. I feel like, maybe I misspoke a little bit. I'm sure that at some point in school, I learned about mythology because it's not like I was in my 20s and like, oh, the Greeks and the Romans had all this mythology. Like I knew I had that knowledge already. It wasn't a new concept to me. But I am sure that from, kindergarten through high school, I probably got about 3% ancient history, and the rest of history that I learned in school was all about American history and the Civil War, right? I know I came out of high school knowing a whole fucking lot about the Civil War. But yeah, it's like, and I have complained to both of you about this in the past, right? Like America thinks history begins and ends in 1776. And it also thinks that ancient history begins with Jesus. Like that's ancient history to most Americans. And I really am kind of making these swath judgments of Americans, which, I mean, America is the melting pot. So obviously not all Americans think that way or feel that way. I'm just speaking to you from my own experience, having spent my entire life in the United States.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us it's similar here in the sense that, we're an even younger country. We literally just celebrated 150 years. But I think you're right in the sense that we also have mostly a lot of Canadian history, although now what I understand is there's a lot more Indigenous history being taught.
Yes.
But I remember, but
that's our progress here.
Right.
That we talk about,
which is good.
Indigenous people.
Exactly. So that's something that's new. But I remember when I was in high school, you had to take like a world history class to learn about world history.
That's probably what I had.
Yeah.
Like one class in like 15 years. and
that world history was basically Europe,
Right. Okay. Right.
So yeah, I think as an individual, you have to pursue that for yourself, either in university or just on the side in order to pick up some more history. Yeah.
And I do see a turning of that tide in America, especially with today's, our most recent generation. First of all, my generation is the last generation. I believe my generation is the last generation to have lived through a period without the internet.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Right? Because the dawn of the internet was what, in the 80s?
I don't know actually. I don't remember having the internet when I was little, but it might just be that we just didn't have it. Like, it seems very recent.
Right. I mean, the internet was essentially born in the 80s,
Yeah, I don't
right?
think it's like, I don't know about in America, but it wasn't popularly used in homes here when I was younger.
Right, right. Well, here, so fun fact, a lot of the technology that eventually became the World Wide Web was developed here at the University of Illinois.
Hmm.
Oh,
You can Google that and read all about it. I am very proud of my alma mater. We've actually done a lot of really cool things.
okay.
So yeah, so that's like I feel like we're diverging into a whole bunch of other topics. But let's save those for future episodes.
Okay.
So do either of you have any closing remarks about the Virgin Mary or stuff that you came prepared to talk about that I didn't let you talk about? And yes, that question's mostly for you, Kendall.
No, I didn't. We didn't have a repeat of our first interview. I mostly just intended to relate everything back to how she's connected to the other goddesses. So
Okay.
I have something. I have something.
Yeah.
You're shocked. Because you're talking about iconography. So I was waiting for you to mention this iconography. So one of my least liked, and I should say that I still love Mary in a way, like in that sort of nostalgic way, because she was such a large part of my life as a kid. But one of my least like iconography or representations of her is the one, and anybody can kind of Google it, but is the one where she's basically standing on top of the earth and standing on top of a snake. So there's like a snake under her foot.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Touching the snake. And sort of she's kind of like on top. And that like irks me because I don't know if I talked about that. Maybe I did when I did my snake episode for the podcast. But that irks me because the symbol of empowerment for women for so long is the snake.
Right.
And this depiction has Mary stepping, and I think it's a fantastic metaphor for exactly what happens to women's rights, women's power, is that a dude has decided to place this one woman figure. And that's not Mary's fault. That's like a dude's fault. Just making that clear. Has decided to put her figure as a sort of a crusher of women's power. And I think it's a great metaphor for the fact that the church has crushed women's power.
Right. Well, if she's standing on top of a snake, right? Because the snake was already an image of evil based on the Garden of Eden story.
That's right.
I assume that's why she's standing on a snake.
That's right. So the implication is that, yeah, that's right. That she has sort of killed or cleansed the world of the snake, but yet the snake is empowerment and wisdom and all those kinds of things. So I guess in a way it does represent Christianity, certainly through the Dark Ages, where there was no knowledge, no wisdom, no anything.
Right.
So anyways, that iconography is my least favorite of Mary. Because of that. Because it's like in your face sort of audacity of representing this epitome of pure woman smashing the very thing that made women powerful for thousands of years.
Yeah.
No, that's powerful actually, but it irks me every time I see it.
Yeah. So, Kendall?
Well, talking about that makes me think of what I said to you. I can't remember which. It must have been the last episode. About how early Christianity came in and it like empowered to a degree all these wives that had just been told like you need to just stay at home and you need to just produce children, and Christianity came along and they was like, no, you don't need to do that, you need to share the word of God, but then at the same time told them you've got to act like this person, like this is what you've got to aspire to be, So
Right. Share the word of God, but only if you go out in the world and you don't look like a slut.
yeah, so like it like freed them and enchained them at the same time.
Well, that's a
That's very
great point.
interesting.
Yeah. That's a great point because you're right. In early Christianity, and I wonder if this is because the relationship of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, because early Christianity did allow women to be leaders in the church and did
Right.
allow women, right? And women were learning to read and they were learning to be leaders. You're right. And then over time, it's almost like whoever came to power.
Pope Gregory.
Okay. But even Augustine and them, they just started pushing women like to the sidelines, like, oh, now you have too much power or whatever authority in the church.
Right.
To the point that now in Catholicism, I mean, women have no power at all. They're not allowed to be ministers or priests or.
Right. I saw a documentary. Carla's probably be able to tell me whether this is correct or not. But I was watching a documentary about, I think it was called "When God Was a Woman."
Yes,
and
that's a book.
That was talking about how in early Christianity, women were allowed these roles, like to learn and to preach the word of Christ and stuff, until Saint Peter came along, and he basically rewrote the rules and said, like, women need to be inferior to everybody, to the males. And like basically created the patriarchy within Christianity that before then hadn't been there.
That's okay. So that's interesting. Half of that is true. The other half, I'm not. So if Saint Peter, do they have a vision? So Peter dies quite close to Jesus, so he wouldn't have been able to be around at that time. But maybe, I don't know. And I don't know what this documentary. I haven't seen the documentary. I read the book When God Was a Woman by Berlin Stone. But you're right. You're right. Yes, women were allowed to be priestesses and, like I said, church leaders and established communities. And yes, at some point, they started being pushed out more and more. I don't know about the St. Peter thing. If it must have been a vision or something, or someone claimed it was a vision, because Peter dies right after Jesus. Within, I don't know. I don't remember exactly the date of his death, but he's killed by the Romans. And so the women being church leaders is about, 100, 200 years later, even 300 years later. So, but yeah, it's true that women were encouraged and, allowed to be church leaders. And they had quite a new power outside of the home in the public sphere. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the iconography you were talking about, like with Mary on top of the earth, or like empowering the women, but then at the same time crushing the snake, as in like, but only to a degree. I thought that connected really well with what they actually did.
Mm-hmm. It's a mixed message, to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, since it is the season finale, I'm going to ask you guys the questions they had to answer the first time I talked to either of you. And Carla, yours has changed because initially the first of the three questions was, do you lay claim to a religion? And if so, what is it? But then when Marianne was still on the show, we came to the conclusion that during the course of our conversation, you guys have already answered that question. So now you get to, and you can give the same answer or you can change your answer because things change.
Okay.
Because things change. So share with me something about yourself that people that know you well would be surprised to learn.
Let Carla go first.
And it can be so random. Like,
I don't know if anybody's surprised to learn anything about me anymore, Kelly. I think that people that I call my friends are probably like, oh my God, Carla. Okay. But I don't know if this is a surprise, but I would say that lately I've been leaning more towards, of course, pagan traditions and goddess traditions. So I think that people may be surprised to learn that I no longer identify as a Christian at all. Like for a long time, I was like, yeah, I like to go to church and I like churches and blah, blah, blah. But I think this is the first year where I even said to my mother, I'm like, yeah, I'm not a Christian And she's like, what? That was not good. That was not good. That was not a good conversation. But I think I'm more stepping into that. Like, and again, I'm sort of push and pull because, like I said, I still like Mary, and there's still this nostalgia. For so many years, you're Christian. But anyways, I think this is the first year that I'm really saying, no, I'm not a Christian. I'm definitely in the pagan, witchy. I'm not sure exactly what I am at yet.
Oh, you're eclectic.
I
I'm just teasing.
Who knows? I mean, maybe you have to go through the eclectic phase to find yours.
I think you do. I think you do.
I don't think the language has a word that I can really say yet, but hopefully a word or a term will come to me. So I'm using all the terms to kind of, I guess that might surprise, I don't know if it would surprise them, but that's something that's sort of developed this year more strongly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the word eclectic is kind of falling out of favor because now the new word is cultural appropriation. Right. So eclectic is no longer a good thing.
Yes.
Witchcraft is turning the tide of that a little bit, but that's another topic. So, Kendal?
Well, in that vein, I'm gonna be completely candid here, right?
Woohoo!
Since meeting you, Kelly, I have opened up more to the idea of belief in something spiritual.
Yes.
So yeah, nobody knows anything about that because I had not told anybody. So
well, you just told me and Carla. You just told me and Carla and our, my 6 listeners.
I'm not sure where that's going yet, but there's definitely some defined feminine there.
Good.
I'm leaning towards.
That's amazing. And I do feel like I have had just a little window into the spiritual development of each of you as the show has gone on and as I've talked to you more. And but in my religion with no name, I try and be humble. Like I don't want to take credit for that. If I helped guide you in that direction, that is because I was guided. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's and therein lies my humility, hopefully. Somehow I think that humility isn't something that always comes across to people that listen to me on this podcast. I don't exactly scream humility. Okay, so current favorite TV show or movie? Kendall's like, are you kidding me? I do not have time to watch television.
I am a TV fanatic, guys. I watch TV all the time. Sorry.
Which I don't understand. Like, how do you do that?
It's like, I don't know. It's my escape. So I would say the show that I'm watching right now, I don't know if it's favorite TV show, is Coroner. It's a Canadian show about a coroner. And it's like a detective show, but I love the morbidity. I love the science of it. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that show Bones, but my favorite part about that show was all the science. Like in my heart, I'm a secret like science geek, but I just don't want to go to school for science. You know what I'm saying? Because then it becomes multiple choice tests and boredom.
Right.
I love science. So Coroner is kind of like that. Like it's like a coroner basically doing all these autopsies, and there's some science and detective work. So that's what I'm watching right now. But I always watch like 5 different shows at the same time. So the other one that I'm watching, of course, is RuPaul's Drag Race because,
of course,
I mean, so yeah, those are my 2 favorite shows right now. But I am like a TV junkie, movie junkie. I will say to my students, "Oh, do you know this show or this thing or this?" And my students will blankly look at me, and I'll be like, "Do you guys not spend any time at home on Netflix?"
I know, right? That's often my reaction. Like, what do you live under a rock? How do you not know about this show?
So I have the same reaction whenever my boyfriend will mention like an actor or a film, and he's like, "Have you seen that?" And I'll be like, "No," and then he'll just look at me like, "You even knew
How is that possible?" Right. So, current favorite TV show or movie? Go.
Well, most recently, I watched Cabinet of Curiosities on Netflix.
I've
No.
heard of it. I think it's in my watch list, but I haven't actually seen it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like an anthology. There's 8 episodes, and each episode's a different story.
Hmm.
They're all kind of spooky. So I enjoyed that
Okay.
most recently. But like, I don't watch that much TV, honestly. It's a choice of when my daughter's in bed at night, I can read or I can watch TV, and I'd rather read.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
That's fair.
Okay. Okay. So, final question. I'm going to give it a little bit of a twist. So, for how your life is going right now,
Oh dear.
if how your life is going right now were a movie, what would the title soundtrack song be?
The movie part threw me off. Okay, I have a song already. The song is, hold on, because I want to get the title right and the singer. But so it's from the album Sisters of the Moon by Heather Houston, and the song is Rewild My Soul.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with the song. The
Is
other
that
one
on
that
the is that on the Heroine's Journey playlist?
I don't know, but what's it?
Can you send that to me?
Yeah, Flora has shared this. And
Okay.
the other one, of course, is I Am My Mother's Savage Daughter.
Daughter, right?
Right?
That's making the rounds on social media. Yes. Yes.
Sometimes I wake up singing that song in my head and I'm like, ooh, it's going to be a
Yes.
good day.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Kendall?
I want to say something different, but basically everything's gone downhill since the last time I spoke to you. So I'm
sorry.
still going to say probably Imperial Death March.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I would say to you that after death is rebirth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say all, this too shall pass. So
yes.
yeah, all things will end and be reborn. So that I know. So that is you will be okay.
You will
Thanks.
be okay. Trust Carla and I. We're older than you, like much older.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
think
older than Carla. So I'm the mother, the matriarch of this little girl gang right here. Right?
you are.
Because I'm
Yeah.
50.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna go. Thank you for hanging in here with me for much longer than we usually talk.
Mhm.
It's okay.
Yep.
Thanks again for everything that you guys really helped me this first season of this podcast. I don't know if you know that or not, but you really did.
Thanks.
So I look forward to getting to know you both better as we move forward into the second season. So again, thank you, ladies. Thanks to both of you. And as always, I am here if you need me, and I wish you peace and the love of the goddess.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Kendall, and talk to you.
Thanks to all the listeners for an amazing first season. Stay tuned to the social media channels on Instagram and TikTok to find out when the second season will start in January. I'm not sure about that yet, but I'll keep you posted. I'll keep posting videos, and I will keep you in the loop of that goddess-loving energy.